So many people are blissfully unaware of how much their actions and decisions are driven by this stuff. Like, if I'm being honest, like, I should have been a counselor probably, just talking about career. I should have probably been a counselor, and I should have lived in a little surf town, and I would have been way happier than like all the lofty things that I was doing. I actually did enjoy professional DJing because it did play into my natural gifts, but like in general, all the other things I did, running tech companies, starting this kind of business and that kind of business, were just because of how I thought it would make me look to others. That's it. And I was consumed by the people pleasing. I was consumed by validation. Yeah, it was crazy how, when I look back, how many of my life decisions, day to day or big ones, were driven by the underlying emotions of how I felt about myself.
Sean, what's up, bro?
What's going on?
Bro, it's great to meet you, dude.
Likewise, man.
Man, I've been hearing great stuff about you.
No, God, I hope not too much.
Dude, all the stuff you're doing is amazing, bro.
Oh, thanks, dude. You too.
Yeah, the men's groups and just I can't wait to hear your story and more details and stuff, but I just that journey, bro, and just the impact that you're having in so many men's lives and it just the ripple effects of that, dude, is just fire, bro. So thank
Yeah.
you for all that you're doing, man.
No, thanks, man. That's nice. I need to hear that. I don't know, just like the running of the organization, and so it's just nice to be reminded that it's having an impact.
Yes, dude, absolutely. And your follow-up stuff is fire, right? So Big Joe,
Joe
one of
Roma.
your
Yeah.
yeah, Big Joe Roma. So he's the one that connected me and stuff, right, to you. And so so now I'm on your Ninja mailing list and I'm getting all the updates of all it's dude, I love your stuff, dude.
Oh,
It's
thank you, man. I really
yeah.
appreciate that. And that's nice to hear. Yeah, a lot of people don't really get what we're doing here, but so it's nice to run into somebody who does.
Yeah, well, having a PhD in emotional cluelessness, like I
Yeah.
appreciate, I appreciate what you're doing,
Yeah, well,
man.
I'm right there with you. So, dude, your signs in the back are fantastic. Where'd you get those from?
Oh, thank you, bro.
But you just basically order it, you tell them what you
Yeah,
want on it, and
you
boom.
just pick out the letters, and then boom, they send you. It's a plastic. It's all plastic, and
Wow.
you just plug it into the wall, and it's real super easy, bro. Super
Yeah.
easy. So Canadian, I love the accent, bro. I love
Oh,
it.
you think I have an accent? Oh man, I can turn it on if you want. Give me a beer and I'll start being like, "Oh, I'll meet you down. I'll take the car down to the bar. We'll meet you down there. We'll turn off the news on the who's.
Don't you know? Yeah.
Don't you know? Yeah. I
Yeah.
do say a lot, so that's one cliche that I say a lot. But so do Australians and other South Africans. So like whatever.
Yeah, that's
The
right.
Commonwealth thing. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing like an event for a men's group at some point where you just bring all the guys together. And I was thinking it'd just be nice to do one in the somewhere central and in America. So I
Yeah.
was thinking about actually Denver or something like that. So
Yeah, that'd
as
be
long as
great.
as long as the guys can handle the altitude, well, we should be good.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's right. Just get on the old oxygen, the little oxygen bottles, the
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I
little.
struggle there, man. As somebody who grew up basically at sea level and like spent my whole life there, even the skiing here is pretty low altitude compared to even just hanging out in Denver.
Yeah, yeah. Because are you so where you're in BC? Where are you
I'm
at?
basically in Vancouver. I'm on the Vancouver Island. Yeah, Vancouver, basically just above
Okay.
Seattle, west
Oh,
coast of
awesome.
west coast of America.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's beautiful out there.
Oh yeah, it's so beautiful. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. That's why I live here. It's like living on the Oregon coast, or I don't know, the east coast of the States or whatever. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Dude, I'm so stoked, Big Sean. This is
Yeah.
awesome,
Big
man.
Noble. Let's do it.
It's great. Okay, EQ Gangster audience. I am so stoked, man, to share our super duper VIP guest with you all today. Those y'all watching on YouTube or listen to the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, this guy, and listen, I don't blow smoke up anyone's nose, y'all. This guy, he walked in the room and like I immediately got chill. I was ready to either go chill on the mountains with my snowboard and Big Sean or sit on the beach sipping some margaritas, whatever. This guy is cool as pond water, man. He is awesome. So check this out. I'm going to read some of his bio here. He's a definition of a connector, which is
Oh,
totally
geez.
true. In just a few minutes of talking to him already, his greatest skill has always been his social intelligence, which all my EQ homies out there, you all know that is an aspect of emotional intelligence. So his ability to build rapport with people from all different walks of life. He's got a marketing degree. He's a serial entrepreneur like myself. What? Shout out to all the entrepreneurs out there. He facilitates online discussions and video men's groups for guys looking for personal growth. Men get to talk through their challenges and receive feedback and guidance, helping them grow into being even better men. Now, check this out. He's also been doing this for over a decade, 12 years now. So check his background too. He's lived in a surf town in Mexico for 6 years. Can't wait to hear some of that skinny. Professional DJ for a decade. What? He can break it down like a shotgun. That is awesome. He's visited 37 countries. He's tremendous. Okay, now check. I can't wait to hear some of this stuff too. He was bedridden, chronically ill for 5 years, going bankrupt from a business failure, abusive childhood with alcoholic parents, cheated on in 4 different relationships, faced multiple addictions, plethora of emotional issues. The list goes on. So anyway, this guy is the real deal Holyfield, the cat's pajamas, the bee's knees. Cannot wait to get to know you, Sean, and learn from you, brother. So man, tell us about yourself, brother. Fill in some gaps.
Well, first of all, Noble, man, I think I was wondering if you do any PR work, because I'd love to have you just show up and intro me like that every time. That's wild, man.
I'd love to, bro.
That's wild. Yeah, I mean, you make it sound like I have it all figured out when I definitely don't, but that made me smile, so thank you. Yeah, man.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. So, dude, so what so and we'll jump in, right? Because as you talk, right, we'll flow
Hmm.
and stuff. But like, what was your kind of if you wouldn't mind, and obviously set boundaries, right? Because if you don't feel comfortable with a particular question,
I'm an
just
open
tell me.
book, man,
Okay.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay. So how did your childhood set you up emotionally, good or bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's one of the most important questions, right? Because here we are on the EQ show, you know, and yet it's the thing that nobody ever talks about, especially us guys. And it all comes back to our childhoods for the most part. The more I've learned about myself and why I show up in the way that I do in the world, and the bad habits that I try to get rid of, or like things about myself that I don't like, or um, old patterns, it all ties back to growing up, because as children we don't have logic. We can't exhibit logic until we're 12, and so we have all these years we're just taking everything in emotionally, and we can't really reason what it actually means and how it's not actually about us and all these things. So for me, growing up, I had a pretty ideal childhood. I had a brother that I was pretty close with, played a lot of sports. My parents stayed together. um, we lived in a not a fancy neighborhood, but in a neighborhood that was decent, sort of middle class. And we didn't really have a lot of money, but we also didn't really want for anything. And my parents were loving, gave us everything they could, sacrificed a lot, and basically, in a lot of ways, I had a perfect upbringing. The one way in which I was haunted by my upbringing was my parents used a lot of shame and disapproval. And so that really set the stage for how I felt about myself through the rest of my life, because um I was made to feel like the choices I was making, or how I was showing up as a kid, whether that be playing hockey, whether that be in school, whether that be socially, I was made to feel through some of the language that they were using that I wasn't enough, or that I was never doing things right, that I was wrong a lot of the time. And so then little Sean goes out into the world and starts to try to like achieve things. Of course, I'm going to try to overachieve because I don't feel great about myself. Start taking these big swings at businesses. I start taking all these, trying to prove myself through women and business, and getting validation, and having fancy titles or fancy work, all of which caused a lot of pain and suffering, and like put me in situations that were really difficult, like going bankrupt from a business that I probably shouldn't have been in the first place, when really I just wanted to tell people I worked in the music industry. So yeah, it really haunted me. And then eventually led to a lot of people pleasing, which you and I talked about before. Just a lot of really low self-worth, which led to a lot of unhealthy habits like seeking validation from sex and women, a lot of coping mechanisms as well, and low-level addictions through food and weed and other stuff like that, porn. And so yeah, it really haunted me until only a few years ago. I'm 37 now, and really like those patterns and that childhood stuff really drove a lot of my decisions unconsciously for until I was, literally 33, 34.
Sean, man, thank you for your vulnerability. And your transparency.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
much.
good. I thought that was a ramble. So I was like, okay, good.
No, dude, that was awesome.
Yeah.
No, because and I, man, and it's so great, dude, that you got your start on this, your emotional healing and emotional growth journey a decade before I did. So
Mm,
and thankfully, like we've got a 14-year-old daughter, we're teaching our daughter all this stuff, now
great.
for the past, however many years, so that, I mean, man, I can only imagine how my life would be different if I had started learning this as a kid.
Oh man.
You,
Yeah,
you,
totally different night and day. Like so much less suffering, so much less, so many less wrong turns, whatever. But that's the journey.
yeah, right. And so, the other thing I think is like so many less injuries, not only for myself, but for all the people that I've hurt through my emotional immaturity, my people pleasing addiction, and all that stuff, not having emotional intelligence, emotional awareness to, and I had no emotional regulation. I had no self management skills, none of that stuff. What was it for you, Sean? That so that, and this huge awareness there of kind of like how your childhood has impacted your a big portion of your adulthood. What was the turning point for you that's like, oh snap, okay, this is something's not right here. What was that pivot point for you?
Yeah, it's a great question, Noble, and thanks for all the praise there around that. And because even I, running men's groups, don't get to share that part of my journey a ton. So I really like talking about it and like sharing it because it was harder and harder in wisdom, right? Yeah, the big turning point for me was honestly I got sick. I got chronically ill. I was in Colorado actually on a ski trip, backcountry ski trip off Breckenridge, and I was at high altitude, and all of a sudden I couldn't get out of bed, and went home back to Vancouver, Canada. Still couldn't get out of bed, and eventually scrapped my way to getting answers a long time later, probably 6 months to a year later, and it was turned out to be Lyme disease and a bunch of and mold poisoning and a couple other things. I must have gotten bit by a tick when I was living in Mexico on a surf trip or something because the ticks are around a lot in the jungles, and so yeah, I basically had 3 years after that of like just laying in bed in my parents' basement or laying in bed alone in an apartment. And so I went from being this man about town, speaking at conferences, just finished up a career being a professional DJ, living that life and all of its benefits, you know, um, and then moving in Mexico and living in the beach and doing all these things. And then basically like all and having successful businesses and traveling a bunch and doing sports and dating a lot and kind of being like a quote unquote living the dream, or at least a lot of people's dream, to basically just being bedridden. I lost everything, lost all my friends, had to give up my business. Um, who I defined myself as disappeared. And through that process of like being sick and not being able to get to bed and having banging headaches every day and all this stuff, I eventually had to learn about, as part of that process, is the emotional side of it and how emotional can contribute to health and the stressors that I was feeling as a result of the emotional suffering that I was going through because I couldn't express it, and because the way and the bad habits it was creating, the people pleasing, the lack of self-care, all these things. And so that was really the turning point. It was like getting sick and then and then realizing firsthand, having to face the fact that, wow, these emotional issues that I have, like, it's not working avoiding this stuff anymore. And that's what actually, and later I learned that that was the primary reason why I got sick, was because of the amount of stress that was my body was under from avoiding those emotions.
Wow. That sounds like, I mean, I can't imagine, right? The intensity of that journey must have been just massive. So
Super
what
dark. Yeah, super dark times. I hope to never be through a time that dark. Yeah. Again.
so so kind of on that same vein there, what was that identity transformation and journey that was attached to that emotional journey I mean, you are almost literally forced to change your identity almost. Well, what was that journey like?
It's a great question. It shows your awareness because like that was a huge part of the journey is like I was basing my self-worth and like thinking about myself in terms of the achievements that I had or like how I looked out in public or how it sounded like when I said what I did for work or that I lived in Mexico or these lofty things I've done, unconventional things. Um, and I went from that to being like, okay, well, all that's stripped away from me. Who I am, who, and from there, I had to find a way to be happy with myself without all of those things. Like, because I did for a while, I resisted it. I felt really poor about my life and where I was at. And after a couple of years of that, I realized I had to find a way to find fulfillment in my day to day, as limited as it was, because that, for all I knew, that could be the rest of my life. Right. And so I had to contemplate a couple of years in, who am I without all those things? What's still there, even though all the external things have been stripped away. And so it was a massive identity shift from like Sean being this entrepreneur, hotshot CEO dude who's, chasing women around, partying and traveling, to being like, now it's more of a sense of like just my tendencies. I'm really sweet. I like meaningful conversations. Uh, I'm really caring. I love the ocean and the outdoors. It's just like more, my identity is more based on my core values now instead of these external projections that I was making, if that makes any sense.
100%. My dude, as a emotionally needy, emotionally codependent, people pleaser addict, dude, my life was 100% performance based.
Mine too. Yeah. I was all those things as well, by the way. You said it well. Yeah.
That is 100% where my value was.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I saw my worth and my identity was in my ability to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And I went through a similar, I call it hell phase. I went through 2 years of intense suicide stuff for 2 years
Oh, sorry to
straight,
hear.
and then another decade of depression. And so I became the guy that I used to rip on.
Yeah.
Right. I used to rip on the slackers or the pogues or you don't have a dream, you're not doing anything with
Yeah.
your life. I became that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so God's like, okay, McFly, try that out for a little bit with your identity, and let's see how that, how's that? Try that out for size.
Totally.
And very similar journey, man. Very
Yeah.
similar. Like
Sounds like it.
who am I without performance? Like, wait a second, performance is like that is my value. That's my DNA. And then God's like, no, McFly, it's not. And it was it was a big journey. So dude, so thank you, man, for sharing that. That is
Yes.
okay. Go
So
ahead.
much, just before we change topics, so many people are blissfully unaware of how much their actions and decisions are driven by this stuff. Like, if I'm being honest, like I should have been a counselor probably, just talking about career. I should have probably been a counselor and I should have lived in a little surf town and I would have been way happier than like all the lofty things that I was doing. I actually did enjoy professional DJing because it did play into my natural gifts, but like in general, all the other things I did, running tech companies, starting this kind of business or that kind of business, were just because of how I thought it would make me look to others. That's it. And I was consumed by the people pleasing. I was consumed by validation. Yeah, it was crazy how, when I look back, how many of my life decisions, day to day or big ones, were driven by the underlying emotions of how I felt about myself. I'd love to get into in a bit how I got into those emotions and how I processed them in a while. But by the way, yeah,
Yeah, no, I would love to. Well, so one of the so a couple things. So one is
yeah,
I 100% agree with you. I feel like most people have no idea why they do what they do.
no,
Most people never think about what they think about, and again, why they do what they do, and how. So this is something I talk about a lot too during in my podcast. Is so there's so many successful people that are successful for unhealthy reasons.
yes, 100%,
So many, dude,
yeah,
right? And I had a client just before this podcast interview. He said, "Man, I was the youngest of three brothers, and I was 5 years younger than my middle brother, and I was always having to do stuff to trying to get attention. And I always heard throughout my whole life, oh, you're just doing that to get attention. And then I asked him, I said, man, thank you for transparency. And I asked him, how do you think that is still showing up in your life today? And he's like, dude, I think there's a huge percentage of the stuff I do, I'm doing my little inner child is still searching and seeking out, trying to get attention. And he's a successful real estate guy, right? So, again, to
Yeah.
your point, I think there's so many people that, again, it's unevaluated on why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, so the other question I was going to ask you is which you can tie into how did you process all those emotions that you were going through. What's one of the greatest emotional victories that you are the most proud of, that gives you the most significance?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if it gives me a lot of significance, but I can tell you that it gives me a lot of fulfillment day to day now. And it was like once I realized that, the emotions were playing a big role in my chronic illness and just like my general lack of fulfillment day to day and all these unhealthy habits that you're not talking about with the people pleasing and all sorts of stuff. And then the flip side, the binge eating and all this stuff. It's like I'm most proud of the fact that I started to lean into that emotional stuff because it's the reason why people are blissfully aware of it is because the brain's job is to keep us away from pain. And a lot of times those ways that we feel about ourselves are incredibly painful.
Mm.
And so I'm really proud that I started to seek wisdom in that area and just try out different tools. I went to all sorts of kooky things, breathwork classes, spiritual ceremonies of all kinds. I traveled to try stuff out. I read the books, listened to podcasts, did a lot of wandering on the beach alone on rainy days with a journal or whatever. But I'd say the thing I'm most proud of is actually taking the leap into two different tools that have been really successful for me. The first one being somatic meditation. So for me, I hadn't cried in like 5 or 10 years. Like I was a bottled up emotional guy. Do you want me to keep going?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, yeah, okay. I just don't want to ramble too much. So feel
Oh, no,
free to
no.
jump in at any point. Yeah, I hadn't cried in a long time. Felt really stuck with my emotions. So, and a friend said, "Hey, man, like I was trying to do these things to, a lot of the personal development literature is adding stuff to your life. Do affirmations to build yourself up. Tell yourself you love yourself in the mirror. Stand there naked and dance around and tell yourself you love yourself or whatever." None of that worked for me. And a friend who's big in the meditation community said, well, maybe that's because that stuff is good, but it doesn't get at the actual problem, which is that you're carrying this big bag of emotions around on your shoulder, like this default way that you're feeling about yourself day to day. And then the lenses that you have over the goggles you're wearing that affect how you perceive everything coming in are coming from that place as well. And I was like, you know what, that does make a lot of sense, because it seems like no matter how much of this personal development stuff I do, I'm not making progress on these emotions, you know? And so he said, yeah, man, check out this somatic meditation stuff. The only way out is through. So why don't you lean into those feelings and or explore that part of yourself that you've been avoiding through people pleasing and binge eating and all these things? And I said, okay, fine. So I flew down to Berkeley, California, and went to this kind of woo-woo culty meditation. But all it was is this old grandma lady sat me on the floor of her office, and I laid down, and she walked me through some virtual visual exercises to keep my brain occupied while the feelings started coming out. And so it was really just focusing on where's the tension in my chest or where's in my body, and then kind of like being present with it. And then when the emotions started to well up, because they're in there whether I liked it or not. And after the first session, it was like, oh, little crying tingles, interesting. Second session was like, oh, I had a little cry there. I haven't done that in a long time. Third session was like, oh, really crying. And then fourth session was like getting angry at my dad. And then
Mm.
fifth session was, wow, a big sob. And I just noticed that after that series of sessions in 5 days, I was just way less triggered walking through the world. I felt lighter and more clear. And I was still triggered into the old ways, into the old things, the bad habits, the people pleasing, but way less so. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. In digging into those feelings, befriending it, like building a relationship with that part of myself. Aha, there's something there.
Dude, I am doing cheetah flips inside right now, bro. Like you just totally shared my whole journey and what I preach on my podcast in 3 minutes or
Oh,
whatever.
great. I'm so happy
Dude,
to hear it. Oh,
that's
yeah.
so powerful, bro. And so a quick pause here. Thank you for all the work that you have done
Hmm.
on yourself and in yourself to now give us this emotionally healthier guy who is making the world a better place through all your men's groups and all the stuff that you do. One of the things I say in my podcast all the time is emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally.
Hmm.
Think about this healthier Sean, how many people have been impacted as a result of you taking ownership of where you are at and growing and healing and leaning into these very uncomfortable places, man. Thank you for all the years of work that you've done.
Oh, thanks, man. That's such a big compliment because when people recognize your journey, it's really meaningful. Why did you find that emotional? What made you tear up there?
I think when I just love seeing transformation, and
Hmm.
so that's the first part that I love that makes me emotional, but then also the benefit, right? So the all the people that have been impacted as a result of you doing all this work. If you never would have taken ownership, Sean, you'd still be some burnout surf dude,
Yeah,
ex CEO,
yeah, yeah.
still drinking or whatever, and not not at the place that you're at, and not at the place that you're at, but also there's be a lot less people that would have started their respective healing and growth journeys too. So like
True.
I just value the work, man, because dude, I know the last 4 years, the work that I've done, and I just so again, emotionally, I was emotionally clueless. I waved when the emotional clue bus drove by, right? I
Yeah,
just I just waved, and sometimes I
totally.
flipped them off, like screw you, I don't
Yeah,
want that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
like, dude, this journey has not been easy. Like, I
yeah.
think about like it has been when I first sat down with the counselor, he's like, hey, dude, let me tell you about feelings and emotions. Dude, I was terrified.
No, yes, me too.
Right. I like the thought of wait, you want me to pull out 4 decades of emotional injuries?
Yeah.
And I don't know what's on the other side of this door of who Noble is. Like, am I some scary monster? Am I some evil, bad? I had no idea what was at the end of this journey, right? So
Or even the process of the journey, like I felt like, is this going to overwhelm me to the point where I'll just be depressed forever? What happens when I open that box? That seems to be what a lot of guys are afraid of.
100%.
Yeah,
Well, because like how many of us are trained on how to do that work, on dude, I didn't even know the emotional ABCs, right? I
yeah,
didn't like, hey, Noble, start speaking poetry, dude. I don't even know, like, literally. I remember one time my wife and we had this, I call it intense family fellowship, right? Where we, like an argument, right?
yeah.
Intense family fellowship,
I like
right?
that.
And so I finally started to calm down, Well, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, bro, I start waterworks, right? I start crying, and she's like, "Dude, what's up? Like, everything's chill, like we're calm, like what's going on?" I'm like, "I have no idea." She's like, "No, no, no, no," but like, she's like, "Okay, let's start with like a kindergarten, 101 question, like, are you happy or are you sad?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Like, dude, that's how emotionally clueless I was, bro. I
No
had
idea. Yeah, a lot of guys come to men's group and they think there's two emotions: happy or angry.
boom.
That's it. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So, what does your emotional fitness program look like today?
Yeah, well, can I just finish the
No,
last like
please,
journey part of it? Just because
please,
I think
please.
I think that that's a great question, and I think that that's where I'd like to get to. I just feel like I just want to express like what that first session of somatic therapy to now looks like, because that was the
Yes.
journey. Similar to you, I felt terrified going to that place and doing those things. Again, I was afraid that I'd be overwhelmed by the feelings that like I didn't even know what to expect because I'd never let myself go there, so it was so foreign. I just knew that it was scary. I don't even think if I'd faced something more scary. I've been held up at gunpoint. I've been in some really sketchy places in the world, and for some dangerous situations. And it's like I don't think I've been as scared as I have been walking into that office, knowing that I was going to have to open up that box of stuff, you know? So I did those appointments, and what became interesting is that it became easier as the appointments went on. So after opening up that box, having this first couple cries or having that first rage fest or whatever, where I was punching pillows, yelling at my dad, like it just became easier and I wasn't as afraid of it. I realized that, oh, these stuff, I'm the sky and these things are clouds or weather. You know, they just come and go, they pass through. And then from there, I realized how good I felt coming out of the session. Sometimes I felt absolutely exhausted because I was getting at old stuff, but then it was always followed by a feeling of clarity and lightness, you know? And so I learned from there I wanted to learn how to be more emotional. So a friend recommended go watch some sad movies, Marley and Me, watching a dog die, you know, or I don't know, these movies where it's just an emotional, beautiful story. And so I started watching a lot of movies like that and listening to emotional music, and I noticed that I started tearing up more. Okay, I was starting to be able to rebuild that relationship with that part of myself, the emotional side of myself. I would also continue doing the somatic meditation with the coach once every couple weeks. I was able to start doing it on my own, and it's real simple. Anytime, and this is what my ongoing framework looks like now, anytime I feel something emotional that is uncomfortable, like the good emotions, I just try to breathe them in, try to be present with that, right? Because they're kind of rare. The quote unquote negative emotions, whenever I feel something that's disproportionately, especially when it's disproportionately large for the whatever it is, the situation that I'm in, a disproportionately large response, I will then step away from whatever I'm doing. I don't care if I'm out in public. I'll go into a bathroom with my clothes on, sit on the toilet with my clothes on, and I'll breathe in my body, and I will just like basically ask myself, hey man, how you doing, or how you feeling, and I will like hang out and breathe in those feelings. Sometimes there'll be crying tingles, sometimes I'll actually have a cry, sometimes I'll get clarity around what I'm actually upset about, but either way, that continuing to build that relationship with that part of myself has been fantastic. Now here's the interesting thing, it hit a point where it became so comfortable that I started getting into more past stuff. Memories started coming up, and probably the most influential moment was during one of these sessions, which started kind of innocuously. It wasn't like there wasn't any big feelings involved, but I just like felt the little boy inside of me who was sad about himself. And I put my arm around him, and I cried with him. Ever since that session, which was just on my own in my bed like this, or on the couch or whatever, I felt my self-worth issues basically disappeared for the most part. I will always be on that side of the spectrum. I will never be on the cocky side of the spectrum. I'll always be the people pleasing, anxious attachment style, befriending that part of myself that I was always ignoring, the default way I felt about myself as a child, and almost reparenting myself made all the difference. So now that's all I do. Anytime I feel anything, I step away, I just breathe into it. Usually nothing comes up. Sometimes things do. The second thing is psychedelics, which I'm not sure if you want to get into, but I have been exploring with mushrooms, and that's been a phenomenal tool for me to continue to get into some of those emotional things that I'm having a hard time getting into.
So, and I don't know if this is the same thing, but I had a friend of mine. He's a veteran. He's a military veteran,
Yeah.
military guy, and very successful executive CEO guy. And he mentioned, I saw one of his LinkedIn posts or Facebook posts on ayahuasca. I don't even know how to.
Ayahuasca. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Ayahuasca. Yeah.
is that the same thing what you're talking about?
So there's lots of different types of drugs you can take to have these self-awareness experiences. Some of them are more chemically based, some of them are more natural. Ayahuasca is a natural one. You basically think you're dying, and it's a really intense thing. You actually throw up and a bunch of other stuff. I've never done it because it just sounds really intense, and I wanted to start into the stuff quite slowly. But it's the same idea when you're these I don't even know what to call them, drug experiences or psychedelic experiences. I found them thus far to be a phenomenal way to crack open some of the parts of you that you're having a hard time getting into, because you kind of lose your ego, so you're not as defensive around yourself, and these drugs put you into another state where you're thinking about things more creatively, and you're kind of seeing things in other love, like they often make you feel more love toward yourself, and so you see different shade, you get different angles and views on yourself that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so yeah, ayahuasca is one. It's really intense. A lot of people just go straight to that. I wanted to start with mushrooms because I could ease into it more, and it's less of a commitment. I don't have to fly somewhere and do a ceremony and see shamans. I could just, I could just wade into it with a therapist locally in town. I've been amazed by how much I've learned about myself through that. I honestly wish I started doing it earlier in life. Yes, so those are the two big ones for me: somatic meditation and the psychedelics. Yeah.
Again, thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure if you
That's
go. I wasn't sure if I should bring that one up, but
oh
I
no,
have to
no,
be honest.
that's
Like it's been a huge.
dude.
It's been another great tool towards, emotional
Yeah,
intelligence. Yeah,
no, absolutely. However, I mean, I want you, your story is your story. Like
great.
that's yeah, dude. I
Yeah,
want you to share your
feel
story.
free to ask whatever you want about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So now I want to kind of go macro a little bit. Have you, like these men's groups, have you hundreds of men, thousands of men? Like what, 12 years, right? So how many men have gone through your men's groups
Yeah,
experience?
thousands at this point, like probably tens of thousands. Yeah, I mean, I did the men's group for entrepreneurs for 10 years, and that was adventure trip based. We take guys on ski trips and surf trips and stuff, which was fun.
So,
Wilderness
so,
survival training, supercar racing, and then yeah, through mensgroup.com, we have thousands of guys in our community right now. So yeah,
okay. So that's incredible. So what are some things that you have learned about men about their relationship with emotions?
yeah, great question. I mean, you guys, you and I just touched on. You asked great questions, by the way, Noble. Just want to mention
Thank
that
you. I
this has been
appreciate
really
that.
flowy thus far. It's great.
Thank
So
you.
aside from my rambling, but yeah,
It's great.
similar to how you and I described earlier, a lot of men are terrified of their feelings, and that sounds weird, right? Because like there's a lot of things to be afraid of in life. Why would you be afraid of something that's inside of you? But us men have been ridiculed our whole lives for expressing emotions. Even me, I'm a guy who's been running a men's group for 10 years, 12 years now. I've done a lot of these, I've accessed all these tools to develop emotionally. I have a partner who's very supportive emotionally. She's fantastic with me expressing my emotions. I found a lot of women had a hard time with that. They didn't know what to do with that. She's fantastic. And yet, still to this day, I hesitate. I hesitate to express sometimes what I'm really feeling out of fear that it makes me look weak, or that I'm not going to be a good enough partner, or that I'm being judged as gay or whatever, whatever label you want to put on it, whatever tease you might have gotten when you grew up. So yeah, I think I've observed that a lot of guys are just really afraid to share that stuff. And I never really wanted to run men's groups, I never wanted to get into this. This wasn't a goal of mine or anything. I just like invited a bunch of guy friends down to Mexico where I lived, and for a surf trip. We sat in a circle at the end of the surf trip. I thought the guys were going to talk about business because like a mastermind, because that's just what I thought we'd do. And then we ended up, the first guy says, guys, you guys are great. I want to share something with you. My wife just had 3 miscarriages, and I have no idea how to support her. She's feeling depressed. I've been depressed. I'm now my work's being affected. I need, what do you guys think? And it was beautiful because all the guys actually just let their guards down. They were so supportive. And then of course the next guy saw that, and then he felt safe to share
Mm.
his personal thing. And then the next guy felt safe. And so what I've learned about men, to summarize this short story long, as we were joking about earlier, short story long, men actually really do want to share their internal experience and their emotions and a lot of what's going on. And in the right scenario, they will, if they see that it's a private space and they're not going to be ridiculed, and ideally only men for the most part, or people they feel safe with, then they will. Otherwise they're terrified.
Yes, that's awesome.
But the
How,
good news is that we've had 300-pound biker bros with tons of tatties like you. We've had hotshot investment bankers, pro athletes, celebrities, politicians. We've had every hotshot doctors. Like we've had every kind of man in there, and they all want to share. So that's the good news, is that guys do want to get into that stuff. It just has to be the right environment.
I would argue that you are a master at creating the right environment. How do you do that? How do you create the right environment that creates safety and trust for people to open up and be transparent?
It's a good question. It's a great question, and I've done it. I've just done it naturally my whole life. Like even when I was young, looking back as a hockey player, I was always the assistant captain, the captain of my hockey team. Not because I was that skilled, but because I was good at pulling guys aside and having conversations with them and being supportive and stuff. So this is just my natural skill set, and probably should have been doing this stuff since day one as a counselor or something. But in summary, what I've boiled it down to since then is number one, creating a safe room. So for a lot of guys, that means no women around because there's biological factors. And I know people don't like hearing that, but I've seen it firsthand that when guys are sharing vulnerably, if a woman walks in the room, particularly an attractive woman, guys will puff out their chests and start like acting completely differently because biologically we are hardwired to, try to impress the opposite sex, at least in traditional gender norms anyway. So you got to have the right room. It's got to be private and confidential. Secondly, you have to lead with the values you want people to adopt. So in our adventure trips, for example, these are hotshot entrepreneurs. Some of them have gone on to create some of the biggest podcasts. Some of them are on TV. Some of all the books we've read, like a lot of the guys are in this group. They were nobodies back then, like me, but now they're somebodies, and they would be coming in here to talk about their stuff, and they'd show up, and I'd give them a hug, which they'd never have, right? Just like from another guy they'd never met before. Hey, brother, come in, give me a hug. And I'd force them to hug the other guy. It's not like a cheesy, let's hold it for too long kind of way and linger, but like just like quick hug. Also, when we did the circle, I would stand up and do a bit of a speech. I would always lead with vulnerability. So I'd lead by example. I'd be like, hey, here are some things I've been through. These are how the men's groups have helped me. And that really sets the stage because I share some pretty humiliating, humbling stuff, probably that won't be beat in that circle. And you can see guys chuckle about it and be supportive or whatever. And okay, that sets the stage. So it's really about creating a safe environment and then leading by example.
Awesome. That's excellent. Kind of wrapping up here, Sean. What's the current vision, passion, project that is lighting you up right now?
Yeah, good question. It's just mensgroup.com. Yeah, I do it full time. I just am so believe that there's so many guys out there that just they're good men. Some of them are successful men, some of them are even popular men, but they don't feel like they have a safe place to talk about whatever's on their mind. Just normal everyday guy stuff. Nuts and bolts guy stuff, relationships, conflicts, self-worth, boundaries, porn addiction, stuff like that. And so yeah, we just provide a community and online men's groups to do that.
And of men's groups, of what you're doing now, what is it that gives you the greatest joy?
Honestly, it sounds cheesy, but it's like seeing guys like my dad come in and like be a part of something like this. That's a big one for me, is like because I just know how isolated my dad was, and even though he was a lovely guy, he like didn't really have any friends to talk to. And I wonder how much happier our household would have been, because he was he had a tough time emotionally, tough time in drinking and stuff. And I wonder if that could have helped. And to see guys of his age come in and like ask some of the questions that my dad could have been asking, and seeing them actually grow and like build better relationships with their kids and or with their partners and stuff, that's incredibly meaningful. And also number two, seeing guys start their self-awareness journey. So we try to be really approachable at mensgroup.com. That's the whole thing we want to do, because there's so many kooky, weird men's groups wrapped in spirituality and wrapped in ceremony and all this stuff that makes a lot of guys gag. And I get that some guys like that stuff, but we're just trying to make it super approachable. So this is the first step for a lot of men, and to see them come in and hear from other men the stuff that you and I are talking about today, about how valuable it was for them to dig into themselves, their inner world, their emotions, to build emotional intelligence, and to see them start that journey and access these tools like coaches like you, Noble, or other things. It's incredibly rewarding to see that we are a catalyst for guys doing this work.
What's the vision of mensgroup.com?
It's a good question, man. It's funny because I've learned as an entrepreneur that like I kind of have to let go of the vision and let it become what's going to become. But I think in general, it's just to help as many men as possible find guys like them to talk about whatever's on their mind. Like it doesn't matter what challenge you're facing. There's no really new challenges. There are guys out there who are going through the same thing or have been through the same thing, who want to like, talk about it, share what worked for them. And so the more that we can do that, the better. So I don't know if that means, hundreds of thousands of people in our community or what that means, but it's just continuing to listen to our members and build cool stuff that they find helpful.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If I can ask this question, what area of growth are you currently working on?
Oh man, constantly. Like when you mentioned before about like oh, you could have been the burnout ex DJ guy. I'm like, yeah, some days that doesn't sound so bad, honestly. Some days I wish that I didn't have this wisdom, that I wish that I didn't see these parts of myself, because there is something to be said about how it can be a lot of work, digging into this stuff, and it just never ends. It just never ends. So for me right now, for example, the big things are recognizing that I have like a bit of a shutdown pattern around my work, because I had a couple of businesses fail big time when I was younger. We just ran into a project that failed, and instead of like rallying, I like ran away for a couple of days basically, and just recognizing that that's me and that's past stuff. So continuing to try to get those emotions out so that next time that happens, I'm less triggered. And then also number two is my eating is like a comfy blanket for my uncomfortable feelings. And I've never been into the gambling or the hookers or the drugs, or I didn't even think I tried drugs until I was like 30. Like didn't smoke weed or anything. And but if I'm sad or upset or stressed or tired or fatigued or anything, I want to crush pizza and ice cream. That's all I want to do, and just numb out. So continuing to try to build a better relationship with that part of myself so that I can give myself what I actually need, which is, emotional soothing instead of like soothing with food.
That's awesome.
How about you?
Th- yeah. So, dude, I this has been like I can't tell you much, bro. How much I dig this chat that
Yeah.
we've had. So I just yesterday I had just another amazing guy that I just got done interviewing on the podcast,
Hmm.
and it was as soon as the podcast was done, it was so fascinating. You know how emotions work, right? It's emotions are like 4D, right? And there's we have very little, if any, control, over when they show up and what intensities show up. Well, I got slammed, body slammed, like Superfly Snuka. That's old school body slammed. Or modern day, it'd be like a John Cena body slam, right? With emotions, and some were pleasant emotions and some were super not pleasant. It was funny, fascinating. My initial knee jerk response was, dude, unpleasant emotions, let me run the other
Run.
way, right? Like shark in the water. I gotta run away from these unpleasant emotions that are came out of nowhere. And then I was like, okay, wait, stop, pump the brakes, bro. Pump the brakes. What's going on? What is going on? And dude, it was coming on fast, right? This Jaws was like coming on fast, kind of going south. And
Yeah.
and so I'm like, okay, I need to do something. I need to like take an action here. And so this may not be the right answer, not as good as a Sean course of action, but I'm like, let me take a nap, bro. Because when
Oh
I
yeah.
when I'm on fumes, I everything starts to degrade exponentially. My decision making, my
Yes.
thinking, right, just everything. So I'm like, okay, let me just take a nap. Well, as soon as I lay down, dude, the jaws is still right on my rear end, on my butt cheek. So I'm like, I need. So one of my exercises that I do that I haven't got down yet. So this is one of the areas I'm working on is creating a muscle memory. We call it in the army, in the military, we call it a battle drill. So that's it's muscle memory, how we shoot, how we do a particular move, whatever. And one of the emotional battle drills and muscle memories that I'm trying to create is when I get a jaws coming after me, rather than immediately running, let me immediately dump or vomit. And I've got a little acronym I call APED, APED, acknowledge, permission to feel, express, and discuss. Acknowledge all those emotions. So I just vomited all those emotions I was feeling, just wrote them all down. Well, first, there's two things I did. The first thing was, what are all the topics that these emotions are coming from? So I wrote down all the topics first, and then I said, okay, now what are the corresponding emotions that are attached to these topics? Boom. Then I slept. And it's so funny that you asked that question because on Thursday, my Thursday episode is talking about how I came out of this quick kind of depression hit that I got hit by. Because the other thing that I did after I woke up from my nap was went downstairs, got on our deck, and I'm like, Noble, I have so many things to be thankful for. So like I'm thankful that I acknowledge my emotions. and I didn't really allow myself to process necessarily. I allowed myself to kind of like get the initial feel from the emotions, but I didn't really necessarily process. But then, I allowed myself to initial feel, and then I went down and did I did a whole list of gratitude. Like, okay, what are all the things I'm thankful for? And dude, it was crazy. But as I went through that gratitude exercise, a lot of those intense emotions just started to dissipate, and you know what I mean, to a manageable level. So,
Great.
so again, short story long. On not this Thursday. This Thursday is kind of phase one of the episode of the thought that I'm doing, and then next Thursday, my next Thursday episode is how can I maximize? So this will now to answer your question directly. How can I maximize my valleys? How can I become a master at my valleys and my unpleasant emotions rather than immediately seeing them and running? How can I give them a hug and, like, okay, what are you here to teach me? Professor anger, Professor depression, Professor sadness, Professor frustration, Professor, teach me what am I supposed to learn from you right now in this moment?
Yes, that's great.
So that's kind of what I'm one
Yeah,
of the
because they're
things
always
I'm.
trying to teach you something, right? Like this shutdown I had this week. And to be clear, like I'm not perfect at this stuff. And I went on a bender this week with junk food. And like I also went and had a bunch of naps. And like that can be a perfectly good way to process, like maybe you do just need to rest. That was part of mine. I just needed to rest. I was just working and surfing too much and stuff and not sleeping well. So okay. I spent 2 days basically in bed, Netflixing.
Yeah.
Now I'm back on the horse. So is that a bad thing? I don't know. But I think you're right that these things are always trying to teach us something. Like this last episode was my gut was saying, hey, we still feel sad and scared or upset about how that first business failure went. And this reminds us of that. Hey, you should feel into this,
Right.
or try to reconcile that. That's what that's saying, so it is always a teacher. You're right. And I don't think I don't know anybody who gets the emotional management of the valleys right 100% of the time. Like if you're batting like 50%, that's pretty good. So
Yeah, dude. So Sean, man, again, I cannot thank you enough for the work that you've done, and letting not only myself but the audience, get the value of your lessons and your wisdom and your insights from, again, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that you've been through, and this is another huge one too, Sean. Thank you for still being on the journey.
thanks for saying that, man. Yeah. Yeah, I want to encourage anybody who's listening to potentially start the journey. Just access tool like what Noble's doing with his coaching, or read a book, or check out a men's group, or whatever it might be. Just like whatever seems interesting to you, and if it's just a little sparkle of interest, like go and do it, because the life is an inside job. The more you dig into this stuff, the more you'll succeed. I don't like that word success, but like, you know what I mean? You'll feel better, you'll achieve more, you'll have better relationships. So just get into it and start to access tools, and you will find yourself in a better place.
Thank you, Sean. And it's mensgroup.com.
You got it. Mensgroup.com.
Mensgroup.com. I'll make sure all that stuff is in the show notes and stuff. Super excited to stay connected with you, Sean. Thank you so much for your time, brother.
Likewise, Noble. This has been great, and look forward to having you on the Men's Group podcast at some point.
That would be awesome.
Yeah,
I would
dude.
love that,
I am stoked. Yeah.
bro.